Corridor Improvement Study. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join the meeting this evening. Tonight, we are going to be presenting you information about the study, which is just getting underway, maps detailing infrastructure and transportation specifics, information detailing the existing conditions and the team's current and beginning analysis, and then also some schedule information. Additionally, we're going to introduce you to a new website we recently launched on DDOT's DC's engage.dc.gov website, where you can read more about the project and, more importantly for us and for the project, where you can provide feedback and comments. And I'm going to talk more about that later in the presentation. This meeting is really all about hearing from you. Your input is valuable to this study and to the process. We held a meeting last night as well. Because of the size of the project, we are focusing tonight's evening on Ward 8 conditions, whereas last night's meeting focused a lot on Ward 7's conditions. But I want to rest assured that we are looking at the entire area as one project. With that said, and before I introduce the team, and before we get into the actual presentation, which will be about 40 minutes long, and then we will have a full Q&A afterwards, I do have a couple of housekeeping items related to this technology we're using and tonight's process. Firstly, if you are having any technical difficulties at all, please post to the chat or dial the phone number 202-997-8354, and someone from IT will be able to help you. And I'm going to ask Julia Parker, who's working with me this evening, if she could put that number into the chat. Again, it's 202-997-8354. The virtual public meeting is being recorded, and it can also be viewed live on DDOT's Facebook page. If you want to provide comments or feedback and you're not comfortable being recorded, that's okay. Just go ahead and email Aklilu Haptamarian, whose email will be provided at the end of the presentation, and he or somebody from the team will get back to you. And as always, we welcome your comments and feedback. So please feel free to do that. The recorded meeting will be posted to DDOT's YouTube channel within a week's time following the meeting. And again, at the end, we will provide links to the YouTube channel and the other phone numbers and stuff that could be of use to you. Following this presentation, as I said, it'll be about 40 minutes. We're going to conduct a monitored Q&A session. If you have a question, we ask that you please type it into the Q&A section found on your screen. Destiny, can you switch to that slide? Great, thank you. The Q&A section on the screen, you can see to the bottom right, there's 3 dots. Just click on the 3 dots and you'll see the Q&A. Click on that and a box will appear, and there'll be a smaller box below it where you can just type in your comments, and then hit submit, and we will get and we will see that on our screens. We're going to monitor the questions throughout the presentation, and we're going to address all the questions once we're done with the presentation. Again, we're going to do a formal Q&A at the end, and we'll take the questions or comments. We're going to read through them in the time that they're posted. Unfortunately, if we don't get to some by the end of our time today, we will definitely be posting a full, all of the comments and questions to the website, and they'll be available in a FAQ document as well. We will transcribe all of, in addition to that, sorry, if you are calling on phone, by a phone, and you dialed in by phone, would you please, you can use the *3, and that will raise the hand next to our attendee list here, where I can see if somebody has dialed in. And once we see that raised hand function, we will be able to call on you also to, so that you can get unmuted and we can hear your question. Next, please. To everybody on the call, again, if you do have a question or and aren't able for whatever reason to use the Q&A or would like to be heard, you can also raise your hand. And again, during the Q&A session, we will go back and we will take a look and see if anybody's hands are raised, and we will take them in the order that they appear on the screen for us. We are also going to be using the chat feature. I will say last evening, a lot of people used the chat feature to provide us with comments. We got a lot of suggestions, recommendations, ideas of areas that people saw concerns, and they posted those in the chat. Please feel free to go ahead and do that. We're going to be looking at all of those at the end. We get, as I said, this will all be recorded and we'll have all of that information for further review by the team and assessment. So that's for if you feel remember something while we're talking, or you see an area on a map that you want to speak to, please go right ahead and put that in the chat as we're talking. Okay, so now we're going to get underway. That I've gotten through all of the housekeeping items. First, we're going to go through the agenda, which you can see on the screen here. We're going to do some welcomes and introductions, so you know who from DDOT and the consulting team are on the call. Or on the meeting this evening. We're going to do a general project overview and purpose. Again, we are here to hear from you and to get your insights into your thoughts on what you're seeing, in addition to the analysis and current conditions information that our team has already been looking at. We're going to talk about the goals for the meeting, the project intent, our approach. We're going to provide a schedule as well. Then you'll hear from some of the consultant experts, engineering experts, and we're going to talk about current conditions and infrastructure, including transit, traffic, and pedestrian and bicycle issues that we're, not issues, but conditions that we're seeing, some data points that will be, I'm sure you will find of interest as well. And we're going to be doing an overlay of a mapping series that you'll see as well. We're going to show a lot of maps this evening. I know that we're all on screens and sometimes it's hard to zoom into these maps, and there's going to be a lot of information. I do want to assure everybody that all of the information is available on the website that we're going to introduce at the end, and we're going to walk you through that website so we can show you where everything is located. And the maps all zoom out as well and get larger, which makes it a lot easier for people to read. So we will go through all of that when we get to the next section, which is going to be our public outreach methods. And then we'll just provide some project contact information, at which point we will then go into our Q&A session. And during the Q&A session, we'll be moderated. Again, we're going to be taking people one at a time. Everybody is off screen and everybody is muted at this point, except for the person who is talking. And we'll be able to unmute people as questions come in or as we go through the Q&A later on. Next slide, please. With us this evening, we have our project team from DDOT. We have Ravi Gambier, Aklilu Habtemariam, Devani Patel, Yvonne Thua, and Preston Jute. From the consulting team at Jacobs, we have Chris Conroy, Brett Nine, who you will hear from right after I finish speaking on this slide. Oh, not yet. First, we're going to hear from our project manager, Greg Alt, Roshane Huang, Giri Kalim, and David Goodman, and all of whom will be presenting information this evening. And then on behind the scenes, we have Destiny Mitchell and Julia Parker, who are helping with the chat and the Q&A tonight and are part of the KGL communications team. At this point, I would like to ask Aklilu Habtemariam, who is our DDOT project manager on this project, to say a few words and welcome. Aklilu?
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aklilu Habtemariam. I am the DDOT project manager for the DC-295, I-295 corridor improvement study. I am working on this project along with the DDOT project team introduced earlier. Now I will pass you over to Brett to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Aklilu. Appreciate it. And hello to my fellow DC residents, and glad you could attend tonight. I'm Brett Nine. I'm the project manager that's leading the Jacobs and KGL team on this important DDOT project. The DC-295, I-295 corridor improvement study is also sometimes known as the Reconnecting Communities Safety and Operational Improvement Project, which kind of gives you a clue of the focus. It has a twofold purpose, which I'm going to describe in greater detail in the next few slides. But first, for some quick background, it's important to note that in September 2022, the mayor's Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Force created a vision report. And in that, this project was specifically identified as a long-term commitment to improve safety and increase multimodal transportation options that would ultimately reconnect your communities. And that's both Ward 7 and Ward 8 that we're talking to you all tonight about. The redesigned concepts that will ultimately be developed out of this study will seek to reconnect your communities that have been divided from each other and isolated by the highway and the adjacent railroads. And, you know, we really are focusing on River Terrace, Parkside, Mayfair, Eastland Gardens, Kenilworth, historic Anacostia, Fair Lawn, all of them that, you know, have been affected by the highway that's been there for over 50 years. It will also benefit all DC residents and visitors by making it easier to access the communities and the neighborhoods in both Ward 7 and Ward 8, and with infrastructure investments that would improve the safety and connect the isolated neighborhoods to things like the Benning Road streetcar extension or downtown Ward 7 or downtown Ward 8 and the Minnesota and Deanwood metro stations, as well as Anacostia station down near you all. Go ahead and switch the slide over for me. So what we're focusing on is the context of the study. It's based in, you know, on the established and ongoing Anacostia Watershed Initiative Program, also called AWI, excuse me. There are several core projects that are underway, and we're going to have a map here that'll show you those. And there are also 3 of them that are core projects that affect the crossings of the actual corridor and along the 295. Those are the pedestrian bridges, and there's actually a new one being discussed down at Anacostia as well. For the meeting this evening, though, we have these 3 questions that we would like you to keep in mind as we walk through the presentation, so you can actively contribute and provide valuable feedback during the Q&A sessions. And those are really the things that you'll keep in the back of your mind. And they're all very similar, but they're just a little bit different context. The first one is, have you personally experienced connectivity or other transportation issues at the locations that we've identified that you're going to see on the maps? Then the second question is, are there locations where the same issues you see as connectivity or transportation occur, but we didn't identify that you want to contribute to? And then the third one is, do you have other ideas about improving biking, walking, and the idea of getting to both sides of that corridor that you would like us to consider as well? And those could be pretty big ideas that are, you know, different than any of the things that we talk about tonight. Go ahead to the next slide. So the map that I mentioned, this is the core projects. Those are already underway or have been being completed and are identified on this map. You'll see this project itself is tagged as number 4, which is the DC-295 study. So this gives you an idea of all of the different projects that are going on and are underway within the district. I know one that's very talked about a lot recently is the 11th Street Bridge project, which is number 11 down in your Ward 8, that where connection comes across to the corridor from 11th Street. All right, switch the slide. So I want to give you the overall intent and approach, the scope of work, if you will, and it's focused on investigating the feasibility and ultimately the construction of a variety of improvements depending on the location in the corridor and the needs of that location. So these improvements could take the form of safety improvements to improve pedestrian crossings and also improve vehicular connections and interchanges. Things like the addition of multi-use paths for pedestrians and bicycles, the idea of additional pedestrian bridges, which are in addition to the ones that we already have, and that would require also improved access to those. At grade complete streets. That's a term that we talk about a lot, that transforms the street from just a typical roadway into well accommodating both the pedestrians and the bicycles as well as the vehicles in a safe way. And then we're even ultimately going to be considering things like undergrounding or depressing parts of the highway segments, or moving some of the rail lines into tunnels or other type of less intrusive types of locations through the corridor. So all of those are intended to promote equality and sustainability by increasing the mobility and providing the multimodal transport options. The DDOT's project management administration, it really envisions the project as segmented in an effort that could last maybe 20 years. Each of these projects, some are going to be shorter. It's a location-based approach, and it would be similar to what DDOT employed for the corridor project related to the South Capitol Street and the actual Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge, or what VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation, is using for the I-66 corridor that you see improvements are underway now for. So that corridor map here on the right generally illustrates the study area that's considered under this scope, as well as the freeway and the railways that divide it. And of course, it also provides the separation between Ward 7 and Ward 8. So go ahead and switch the slide. So what we're in now is phase 1 of the study. This is the first study period, and phase 2 will be the second. The first one is focused on considering the current conditions, stakeholder interests, public involvement, that's you all, and then the contemporary best practices, as well as real strong reference documents like Move DC and Vision Zero DC. Those have priorities that we're going to really try to focus on implementing. It will build on the previous analysis and recommendations from 2015 and 2017, where safety and geometric improvements were included in those studies. It has 5 key subtasks, which are identified here: project management, the stakeholder and public outreach, establishing existing conditions, data review and analysis, and then finally existing conditions report. In other words, creating analysis and showing what our recommendations are. It'll be focused on things like improve access to the frequent transit routes and facilities, access for communities, jobs, facilities, public service destinations, and of course, reducing the safety risk. We'll also review and refine previous DC-295, I-295 mainline and interchange concepts where those were seeking to improve the vehicular flow itself, so that they would, try to address some of the congestion concerns that that create problems for you all as well. Go ahead and switch to the next slide. So the next slide here in the scope defines what would be in phase 2. So we're phase 1, which will be done in about June, and then we'll begin to transition to phase 2. So phase 2 will take the identifications of the locations and the recommendations that we're doing now in phase 1, and it'll focus on recommending both our 3 categories of projects: short-term, midterm, and then long-term projects. In other words, that's why this thing might be spread over 20 years. Those concepts will be focused on a cross-corridor and neighborhood-to-neighborhood connections, and we'll prepare a more detailed schedule and planning level cost estimates so that we could understand what the costs are. So each of the projects that will be evaluated in that phase will be weighted or ranked, if you will, on their ability to address connecting communities and the equity issues that we want to make sure uphold the district's sound transportation priorities that we mentioned in the previous studies as well. Go ahead and flip to the schedule slide next. So this slide captures, in a generalized way for you all, the idea of the current project schedule. As I mentioned, the phase 1 schedule is about 10 months, and the second phase would be about 8 months. So we're looking at about 18 months total. So you can see that we're about halfway through this first phase, and it'll be completed in this fiscal year. probably about June, and we'll be back to you in June to present the findings. And you can kind of follow the diagram here. You can see we used a road to illustrate it. We completed the data mapping in October. We're now in this existing conditions analysis. That's why we've added "we are here." Throughout the project, there's ongoing project management tasks, and we hope to get to the report of the findings in June, which is when we'll come back to you with the second round of meetings. And those will be in person so that we'll be able to provide displays and actual large format plans and boards to help you understand. So along the way, there are AWI website project updates and then the Engage DC that Karen described. And then after the completion in fiscal year 24 of this phase one, then we'll move directly into phase two, which we think will be done next year. So go ahead and switch over to the next slide. So at this point, now that I've explained the intent of the project and everything that's involved in the scope, we're going to transition to the map series that Karen mentioned. So this covers a lot of details. We have completed over 100 aspects of mapped corridor existing conditions. Don't worry, we're not going to show you all 100 tonight. What we're doing is we're going to focus on the ones that we think have the most impact. And each of these, I'm going to introduce the team that will be providing you the research and the data in the maps that's shown. First up, we're going to look at our transportation leads. Giri and Rashankan will review the transit network and the historical crash review for the corridor from one end to the other. Then secondly, Greg Alt, who's our planning lead, will review the pedestrian connectivity and walk sheds. And then lastly, David Goodman, who's our bicycle and pedestrian lead, will provide an overview of the existing bicycle network. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead, proceed and turn it over to Giri. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Good evening, everyone. My name is Giri Killam, a senior transportation engineer from Jacobs, and will be supporting DDOT on this study. To keep the story moving forward, I'll provide an overview of the current status of transit coverage within the study corridor, and also the safety aspects that are within the study area. But more important, I think we would like to take this opportunity to get your valuable input for the reasons that Brett mentioned a few slides ago. So let's start with the transit coverage in the study area. Next slide, please. So what you see here is there are 4 metro rail lines accessible through 5 different metro rail stations throughout the study area. And to the south, within the Ward 8, there are 2 stations, Anacostia and Congress Heights metro rail stations. There are no direct metro rail connections on the northern side of Ward 8 within the study area. However, there are a total of 42 bus routes are traversing through the study area, whether they use a small portion within the study area, or they actually use a ramp to get on the corridor, or to traverse through the study area. This includes metro bus, DC circulator, employee shuttles, and all of that. But 18 of them are frequent routes, which mean that you see every bus like less than 15 minutes every time. These bus routes cover major streets within the area, and there are existing and ongoing bus priority projects that DDOT has been looking into to improve the reliability of these bus services. We'll be accounting for those projects as well as we move forward with this study. But what's relevant to our project within this particular focus area is those 15 bus routes actually use the I-295, not I-295, but the 295 corridor ramps, whether it's on and or off ramps. And we are actually in the process of identifying, any mobility, safety, or operational issues that actually, the 295 corridor, currently has, have an impact on the traffic, on the transit operations. So when we find that, we'll be documenting that in our existing conditions report. Next slide, please. We also looked at watershed for the metro rail stations, and with the Anacostia metro rail station, having access on both sides of the 295 corridor, users will be able to walk to one of them within 15 minutes, and even if they live on the west side of the 295 corridor near the stations. There are also pedestrian bridges being planned near the 11th Street and 11th Street and Suitland Parkway that are actually expected to improve the walking experience and also improve safety for walkers and bikers as well. As we continue to assess the need and identify the issues and gaps, we would very much like to hear about your experiences accessing these transit services or facilities, and help us understand if you've experienced any mobility barriers that the 295 corridor poses to actually access your transit facilities. We've also looked at we were also trying to tie in crashes that are related to transit, and we've looked at crash information over the past 5 years, and there are some bus crashes near the 295 corridor. I think especially they trigger due to the heavy traffic exiting and entering the 295 corridor, especially on the northern end with MLK Junior Avenue and Good Hope Road, and the access to the 295 corridor. So we want to get your input on the safety hazards that you perceive that actually stem from 295 corridor or otherwise, and how they impact on your day-to-day use of these transit facilities. Next slide, please. Let's talk about crashes, which actually gives us data-based insights into safety within the area. So we've gathered information on crashes that occurred near the 295, within the 295 corridor in the past 5 years. Next slide, please. There are over 6,600 total recorded crashes near the 295 corridor. 13 of them resulted in an injury, and close to 1,800 of them are, injury. 13 of them are fatal, and nearly 1,800 of them are injury related crashes. The bad news is the percentage of the fatality and injury is slightly higher than the district average. So, but there's also good news. We've seen a decreasing trend over the past 5 years in both the total number of crashes and also the crash severity in terms of an injury or fatality. So that's a good news. But it could be induced because of the pandemic. But now with things coming back to normalcy and traffic picking up, we need to closely monitor how things pan out. And this is probably the best time to actually pick out all the safety concerns and actually develop some safety improvements. The map on the right shows the distribution of these crashes right around the 295 corridor. Brighter the color, higher the concentration of the recorded crashes. And the blue dots that you see within those bright yellow shades indicate the crashes that actually involved a fatality. And the major crash hotspots within Ward 8 are Suitland Parkway, right by the 295 interchange between 295 ramps and the Fort Sterling Avenue intersection, and also on the northern side, it's the Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue near the 295 access ramps. Next slide, please. Okay. We also took a closer look at the crashes that actually involved pedestrians and bicyclists. And there are 127 of them in the past 5 years. And about 80% of them resulted in, fatality, mostly injuries, but 5 of them are fatal, involved fatalities. But they also resulted in a more severe losses compared to other crashes. So this is something that we need to focus on at that location. Again, as I mentioned, within Ward 8, the hotspot is Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue at Marion Barry Avenue and the Good Hope Road intersection. Next slide, please. We are in the process of analyzing crash data, and our preliminary assessment suggests that there are a lot of pedestrian and bike involved crashes at Martin Luther King Jr. and Good Hope Road with the 295 ramps. But predominantly because the vehicles are failing to yield to the pedestrians and bicyclists. So I think that is something that we'll have to take a close attention to why that's happening and how we can actually help with better operations there. But looking at the vehicular crashes, the predominant crashes seem to be rear end and side swipe type of crashes, which typically are attributed to heavy traffic and lane changing that happens on the 295 corridor and also near the ramps. So as we dig a little deeper into the reasons and why these are happening and continue to analyze these crashes, we would like to hear about your observations and experiences while walking, biking, or driving near the 295 corridor, so we can actually include your input into our safety assessment. Now I'll turn it over to Greg to talk about the pedestrian connectivity.
Good evening, folks. Greg Alt, project planner. Happy to be with you tonight. And as everyone has pretty much said so far tonight, this is an opportunity for you all to tell us what's important to you in terms of traffic, of pedestrian, of bike, of connectivity. We got a lot of great comments last night. Please feel free to share your thoughts. This is our examination, our exploration of your community. And it's important that this is your study. This is not consultants coming in to tell you something that you inherently know. We want this to be your projects, your community studies, and we facilitate that work, but it's important for you to share your ideas. And that's what we're doing here tonight. So what I'd like to talk about a little bit is a little bit of a pedestrian connectivity, how we walk, how we move through the Ward 7 and 8, and in particular Ward 8. If we go to the next slide, please. So this first slide talks, and I've just got a very few slides, folks, but accessibility, ADA issues, and what we call the pedestrian friendliness index, which is described there, and I'll go into a little more detail about what this means. The Americans with Disability Act, or the ADA Act, prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in everyday activities. Secondly, the Pedestrian Friendliness Index, or PFI, is a specialized tool that the city uses to assess whether the existing pedestrian circulation patterns are conducive to the pedestrian access. Can you walk through the neighborhood? Do you have good sidewalks, good crosswalks, and so forth? So this exhibit indicates the overall ADA and the PFI conditions in both Ward 7 and 8 around the I-295 corridor. And what we see is that we are generally lacking in accessibility in the street networks, especially near the I-295 corridor. The red colors on the map indicate those areas that lack complete sidewalk system on one or either side of the street. The gaps, crosswalks, may not exist or are deficient. And once again, the number of the existing sidewalks within the corridor indicate that we have difficulty along pedestrian sidewalks along the corridor itself. The blue color on this map represent those PFI, the Pedestrian Friendliness Index, and the darker the color, the more pedestrian friendly the sidewalk and the street system is. So what we see is over in the eastern side of the wards, the higher PFI, better connectivity, better walkability, safer pedestrian. The closer we get to 295, and in particular, those folks that have been cut off back in the 50s, through urban renewal, which is what we all are trying to heal the sins of the past and reconnect these communities, they have less than desirable pedestrian connectivity and less pedestrian friendliness. Next slide, please. So on this one, we focus down in on Ward 8 itself, as indicated on the previous slide. ADA and the PFI, pedestrian friendliness indicators, reflect pretty good connectivity throughout the urbanized area along Minnesota and MLK, but less connectivity along the 295 corridor, and especially getting over to the Anacostia side. We have one pedestrian bridge, as you can see on the map, and it's near the Anacostia High School and Anacostia Rec Center. And as you know, it provides access from the urban core to the open space along the river. The Howard Road sidewalk system is discontinuous as it nears the new South Capitol Street Bridge, but improvements, as we all know, have recently been made along the Frederick Douglass Bridge and South Cap Street and the crossing itself. Next slide, please. So what we want you to think about, this is just kind of an example, okay? So for instance, the distance from the Anacostia Metro Station to Marionberry Southeast is about 2,500 feet, or about a 7.5, 8-minute walk. And the route along MLK, it's well delineated, good sidewalks, good crosswalks. So what we want you to think about, and Carol will show you later in the presentation, all the different ways that you can access us, get information to us, but especially for tonight, put your thoughts into the chat here and to help us understand your situations. Next slide, please. So the last couple of slides that I'd like to talk about, the pedestrian friendliness index within the bus walk shed. So as indicated on the previous maps, the walk shed indicates 15-minute walking times of over 100 bus stops within Ward 7 and 8. Consequently, the vast majority of the project site, both 7 and 8, are within this 15-minute walk shed, and particularly those areas nearest the major arterials. And what I'd like to point out, we had the blue of the pedestrian friendliness index, and as you can see now on this map, we've overlain a yellow hatch, which shows the 15-minute walking from all the different bus stops. And as you can see, a lot of the areas, most of the areas on the east side of 295 have good connectivity to the bus routes, bus stops, and the connectors. Up on the western side of 295, in the gardens area and those areas on the west that were cut off by 295, do not have good connectivity to bus stops. We have 4 pedestrian bridges, and there's a lot of work going on up there. One pedestrian bridge is reconstructed, 2 under construction, and a new one coming. But as you can see, the sidewalk conditions indicate discontinuous and single-sided sidewalks along the street in the areas adjacent to 295, and the pedestrian friendliness indicates, once again, good connectivity to the eastern portions of Ward 7 and 8, and not so great along 295. And then finally, we go into a close-up here of Ward 8. The bus walk shed within Ward 8 is quite good. Most all the neighborhoods east and south of 295 are walkable and very convenient. The areas north of 295 are not very well served currently by the bus system, but we can imagine the new projects that are possibly going to be coming in Poplar Point would identify and provide some additional connectivity within those areas. The sidewalk gap condition, the red areas within Ward 8 is pretty good in the densely urbanized areas nearest to the main vehicular arterials. Some gaps are found in the less dense neighborhoods, and the connectivity, as we've seen, along the Anacostia River is somewhat fragmented and discontinuous.
Greg,
So with that, I'd like to turn it over to David to talk a little bit about bike ped mobility.
can
Thank
you first advance the slide, Greg? I think you were talking to the next slide. There it is. Go back one. Destiny, there you go. In the
Yeah,
last conversation, you were focused on this slide, but it wasn't up for everybody to look
Oh,
at.
sorry. I was, I was
Mhm.
talking about Ward 8.
Okay,
Sorry,
go
folks.
ahead. Sorry. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Excuse me. Again, my name is David Goodman, and my role here tonight is to explain what we've learned about the bicycle environment in your part of town, and also, again, to get feedback on what you all feel like is the experience of riding bicycles in this area. Just something I'd like to maybe start off with is to explain that a lot of bicycle improvements and pedestrian improvements support each other quite a bit. So a lot of times, people will talk about, well, making something, into improving bikeability in a place where people maybe don't feel like it's appropriate or something like that. Is that very often biking and walking go hand in hand in the sense that when you make a road safer to ride your bike along, it also makes the road safer for pedestrians and vice versa. So, and generally speaking, both of those things are considerations that we're looking at in this part of town, especially considering the fact that generally connectivity is not so great. Improving that connectivity, improving the quality of the experience is a lot of what we're aiming for. So if you go to the next slide, I'll introduce this concept that the District of Columbia uses, and a lot of other communities as well, has to do with bicycle level of traffic stress. When we talk about stress, we're talking about the experience of comfort, or lack of comfort for that matter, of riding a bike. So we don't really focus too much on whether there's a bike lane or not a bike lane, or a trail, or what kind of specific facility. What's really important ultimately at the end of the day is how comfortable do people feel using this facility that's out there. And so what we use is a scale. It's rather subjective, but at the lower end of the scale, stress level 1 is an ideal biking environment. It's a very low stress environment. It's the kind of place where people will feel comfortable, or would feel comfortable letting their kids ride by themselves, or going for a family outing, or the kind of environment you might feel that is okay to let your grandmother ride on because she's not in danger out there. That is the ultimate ideal environment, and very often it involves separating from moving traffic and things like that. So trails generally fall into a stress level 1 environment, and then it goes up incrementally, and then there's stress level 4, which tends to be places where people are a lot more confident, very confident cyclists. I'm sure you probably know some, or you've seen some people who are not afraid to ride their bike in mixed traffic, and that's okay too. And our community is made up of lots of different people with lots of different comfort levels, but our aspiration is to try to create environments where more people feel comfortable riding their bike and they don't feel that it's a dangerous experience. So if you go to the next slide, we'll see what these 4 stress levels look like, geographically speaking. And this is an overview of the entire study area, both wards 7 and 8. And something that we found, which probably will not come as a surprise to very many people, is that within the neighborhoods themselves, we have a lot of gridded streets, small gridded streets, generally kind of narrow, generally slow traffic speeds on a lot of the neighborhood streets, which tends to translate into pretty acceptable bikeability. What you'll see is a lot of yellow on this map, and that corresponds to stress level 2, which is, of course, not the ideal environment, but it's something that we would consider to be acceptable for many people. The majority of the people who might want to get on a bike would feel comfortable in those environments. So the good news is that generally within neighborhoods, they're pretty bikeable. They're pretty bikeable and walkable, actually. But the challenge that we've seen is that the major arterial roads, the major roads, the Minnesota avenues and Pennsylvania avenues, those tend to be very high stress level, easily stress level 4, many of them. And which means not only are they difficult to ride your bike on, but they're also difficult to cross. And again, both as a pedestrian or as a cyclist. So what we find is little pockets of isolated bikeable and walkable neighborhoods that don't connect well to each other. And a major theme that we've already started seeing in this overall project has to do with connectivity. How well can people get around? If you feel like it's not safe to walk or it's not safe to bike or transit isn't working for you, it tends to put a lot of pressure on automobiles, and automobile traffic comes with its own trade-offs, right? So we're trying to provide, as Brent mentioned earlier, environments that are multimodal and complete, right? We talk about complete streets. The idea is that you create an environment where people can get around using all sorts of different kinds of modes of travel. So this little snapshot, and if you go to the next page, the next slide, you'll see a detail. Did we have the detail? Oh, we didn't have the detail. Sorry. Anyway, as an overview, it just explains that what we have along the riverfront, you see the green line there, is the Anacostia River Trail. It has easily 5,000 or more average users on the trail, which characterizes it as a pretty well-used and well-loved trail, provides really good north-south connectivity as long as you're along the Anacostia River, right? And we don't all get to use that as our main corridor of transportation, right? Meanwhile, other corridors like Minnesota Avenue don't really have very many facilities at all, and the ones that are there can be a little scary to use. So they're not well connected. This is something that the project will look to fix, right? To improve connectivity of the bicycle network. So to close out, that's an overview of what we've seen so far. We'll be drilling into the comments. We'll be drilling into the information that we're gathering to really focus in on specific locations. So we'll have a better idea of what needs more detailed analysis and what locations need more serious interventions, right? But we need to hear from you. We'd like to know, how does this feel? Whether you ride a bike a lot or whether you hardly ever ride your bike at all, we'd like to know, what does it feel to be on a bike in your neighborhood? Do you have any specific safety concerns? Tell us what those are. It'll help us understand what needs to get addressed directly. And if there's any barriers that keep you from getting, if everything else is great, but there's a particular kind of a barrier, either a physical barrier or some other kind of constraint that keeps you from getting from where you are to where you want to be, we'd like to know about that as well. And put it in the chat or add to it later. And I think that's really all I could say about this, and they'll be around available at the end to answer questions as well.
Thank you, David. Go ahead and advance the slide, Destiny. So we need to wrap this up and get the floor open for you all to provide your question and comments. I just recap real quickly from the schedule I mentioned you earlier. 4 big things left. We've completed the data collection and mapping, as you've seen. We're now working to complete the existing conditions analysis, which your input tonight will help guide us towards the most critical concerns in our evaluations for your area. Then we'll formulate the findings into a report and come back to you in June for a discussion of those recommendations, and then we'll proceed to phase 2. So now I think we're going to turn it back over to Karen. She has a few more points of information she needs to help share with you for you all to stay involved even after tonight. And we would love to hear your comments and questions. Karen, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you, everybody. I can see the chat is abuzz with really great comments and thoughts and feedback, and there's a couple of questions. We're going to get to those in just a moment. I did want to go through very quickly further outreach and public engagement because it's, again, we've mentioned this a couple of times, but it goes without saying this is very important for us to hear back from the community. To that end, as always, you can follow DDOT on their social media channels, which is at DDOT.DC. You can get updates at their ddot.dc.gov website. But for this project, we have a new website, and Destiny's going to switch her page over just a second. So if your screen goes away from the presentation, don't be nervous. We're going to go to the engage.dc.gov website. And I just want to walk you through this new website. It's live now. People are using it. They are putting comments on there already, which we're very excited to see and excited to get people's feedback. There are a variety of different ways on the website that you can share your feedback. If you're not comfortable using, the map, and I'll show you that in just a second, then you can use just a comment section. So if you go to engage.dc, you'll see Destiny's now scrolling down. The first project that pops up is the DC-295 and I-295 corridor improvement study. Just click on the blue button. It'll take you right to the site. This is a site that's designed for public engagement. So the information at the top stays the same, provides general project overview. There's some background. To the right, you'll see a project timeline. That's where information is provided about our community meetings. Brett noted earlier that this is the first of 2 community meetings. Our second community meeting will be actually in person. We will hold 2 again, one in Ward 7 and one in Ward 8. And we will be coming back out to the community sometime in April and May. Those meetings, as soon as we get those dates solidified, will be posted to this website. So just check back on a regular basis and you can get that information. You'll also see at the bottom of this page, and again later on other pages, there's a subscribe button. You don't have to put in your first and last name, but we do ask that you put your email in there, and that way, and then hit the submit button, and then we can get some additional, we can provide information to you. You'll receive emails as we update certain things on the page and things along those lines. There are a number of tabs here. You'll see about the project, project maps, map your ideas, share your feedback, and survey. So Destiny, if you'll click on project maps first, please. Again, project overview at the top, but then you'll see a list here of project maps. These are the maps that we showed you this evening in tonight's presentation. We are going to add additional maps to this site in a PDF, and that PDF will provide over 100 maps actually that our experts and the consultants have been looking at, and the DDOT folks have all been studying, and those maps will be available as well. The nice thing about this feature is while it looks small, if you click on it, it gets quite large, and then you can actually see more details about the map. You can zoom in and out and get some more information about what you're looking at. And then Destiny, if you'll go to the next tab, please. So this just gives you project maps and information that you can take a look at. Then this is kind of a fun way to get more engaged. This is a map your ideas. So this is a real-time data gathering, feedback gathering map where you can click on one of the tabs that you see, the little pins that you see there. There's idea, other issues, bicycle. So Destiny, if you'll just click on pedestrian, maybe. Oh, bicycle, that's fine. So if you have a bicycle concern, you can just click on it, drag it down to the map and the location, and then you can put your comment in and add a comment and then post with the comment, and that will post automatically to us as well. We get to see that and we'll get that feedback. So you can see some people have already started filling in some information there, and the comments are down below. You can also, if you'll go scroll up for just a second there, Destiny, back to where you scroll up on this page for me. Thank you. No, I'm sorry, scroll down. Scroll down. There you go. When you do post a comment, you can choose to post it publicly or not. There's a button there right under the comment. If you just turn off that post publicly, it will not post it publicly. We will get the information, yes, but other people would not see your comment. So there's that choice as well. And then the last thing I'll show you is there is also just a general comments page at the tab at the top. Again, share your feedback. This information is if you just want to share a general comment and don't want to use the map itself or the interactive map, another place for you to just provide us feedback. And then, and then the last tab, I'll go ahead and do that very quickly. Destiny is our survey. Again, these are simple, not simple, but these are questions that are of importance to us. And again, it's just an opportunity for you to put more feedback and more of your thoughts in a format that we can grab the information and see what your comments are so that we can add them to the general analysis and assessment. So thank you for that, Destiny. So that's our engage.dc.web website. I'll put that information in the chat, or maybe Julia, you can put that information in the chat as well. It's https://engage.dc.gov. And we encourage you again to provide your feedback and give us that information. That would be really helpful. And we look forward to hearing what everybody has to say. And in that sense, Destiny's going to switch back over to the presentation. She's going to post the next slide, which has our email for Mr. Habtemarian, and then the engage.dc.gov website. But in the meantime, I do want to get to the Q&A because I want to make sure that we get through everything. So I'm going to do what we did last night. We found that it was very useful to read through the comments that everybody made and not just specifically look for the questions. I will read a little bit quicker because we have quite a lot here, which is really great. So I'm just going to read through these. If anybody is on the phone, I see we do have a couple of call-in users. If you hit *3, we will see a hand go up next to your phone number. And at the end here, I will call on you. If you want to ask a question, we'll take you off audio. And then if anybody else feels that they need to say something, please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand and we will try to get to you at the end. So I'm just going to go through these comments here and then Brett will chime in if there's anything in particular that we need to respond to. Ms. Fuller, I noted here you say you missed some of the meeting. That's okay. We are actually posting this meeting as being recorded, and it will be posted to DDOT's YouTube page within the week. And so if you missed anything that you need to and want to go back and listen to, you can certainly find it there and see the full meeting. And Ms. Fuller also noted, though, she does have a concern about people driving on the shoulder from Pennsylvania Avenue going north towards New York Avenue and the BW Parkway. It is very dangerous. There is some questions about if there's buy-in from the Ward 8 council member about improving cyclist and pedestrian safety. In the last DDOT Ward 8 focus meeting, it was mentioned he has effectively banned any new cycling infrastructure. I think that is something that DDOT will continue to work with the community on in information and would have to check with the council member's office. Okay, let's see. Behavior, the driving behavior, the concern on the behavior continues through to almost up to Nanny Helen Burroughs. People drive at high rates of speed on the shoulder to escape the traffic between Pennsylvania Avenue and Benning Road exit. It's very scary. Seconding Greta's observation, drivers will go on the shoulder frequently and usually at high speeds as well. And again, to be clear, people are driving on the shoulder on 295. Even
Yes.
the new pedestrian. Oh, go ahead, Brett. Did you want to say something?
I was going to say, I personally experienced that myself because I use the exits at Pennsylvania 11th and East Capitol Street as well. And I see that happen all the time as well. So yeah, that's a big issue. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Howard Chittims has said even the new pedestrian median cut through are not ADA compliant. I've seen people in wheelchairs get stuck, and it must be because something that somebody presents. I'm gonna come back to that, and hopefully I will find what that is in response to. That might be in response to a Q&A actually.
Mhm.
So we'll get back to that. I bike through the MLK Junior Avenue intersections every day. The improvements so far, leading pedestrian interval right turn from one lane instead of two, have helped, but there is no enforcement, zero enforcement. So people don't follow the rules or yield to pedestrians and bikes. We had an AM PM crossing guard before the pandemic. Can we bring them back? If we're talking about healing the sins, and that is something that we can check in again with DDOT and get back to you on that response as well. If we're talking about healing the sins of the past, we should also talk about the environmental impacts about having 295 cutting across our community. Lots of toxic fumes coming our direction. Will this project address any of that?
And that's
I know,
a
Brett, you
big,
have a response to
yeah,
that.
that's a big issue we heard about last night. And that is one of the issues that is in the overall package of safety and accessibility. In other words, safety includes those aspects as well. So we're reviewing those factors too.
If we're talking about healing the sins of the past, we should also talk about the environmental impacts of having 295 cutting across our community, lots of toxic fumes coming our direction. Will this project address any of that? I think you just answered that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yep.
The communities were asked if they wanted more pedestrian bridges to Anacostia Park. The overwhelming answer was no for safety and to reduce parking congestion when there's a festival at the park. My kids and I regularly walk to Anacostia Park from Marion Avenue. The discontinuous sidewalks are a terrible problem, along with the food trucks leaving trash and car parts strung on the sidewalks we do have. And then this was in response to how long it takes to walk somewhere. Is it 15 minutes for a 20-year-old or 15 minutes for an 80-year-old?
Right, and that
That's
is
excellent.
a different number for each of them. I believe, and Gary, you could answer this, but I believe that the average that's calculated when we plot the walk sheds is about 17 and a half, 18 minutes, which falls between kind of the 15 and 22 that you do see at different walking speeds.
Thank you. People won't, this is in continuing, I think. Did you want to say more, Brett? I'm sorry.
I would think Gary might have wanted to say something.
Oh no, you've actually covered that. I think typically, the walking speed assumed is 3 to 3.5 feet per second. So that's the speed that we assume.
But the question is very valid that it
Yes.
does vary from age. That's right.
That's true.
Yep. Go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
That's okay. This is just continuing about exhaust concerns. People won't want to walk or even fully enjoy Anacostia Park if they're breathing in exhaust from 295.
Yep.
Walking the underpass to and from Anacostia Park is often deafening at times. Maps do not capture just how disturbing this can be. I would encourage the project team to walk these streets and trails to get a sense of the experience.
And I could tell you, I've walked through the Marion Barry underpass, and I agree that it is difficult. It's, at different peak times in the traffic above. And also there was a comment about the food trucks, and they really congregate to that one parking area. So that's an access issue that needs to be solved as well. Appreciate that comment. Go ahead.
What
Karen.
is the number of bicycles that currently use the bike lanes on Minnesota Avenue on a daily basis?
Gary, do we have statistical separation for bikes from vehicles?
Yes, we don't have it right now, but I know DDOT has some permanent count stations, so we can actually look into that and see,
And answer that question. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Next would be, can we, and again, I think this is more of a community-driven conversation that will need to be addressed off this platform, but how can we improve the bike network in Ward 8 when our council rep won't support any bike infrastructure here? The project team should experience cycling back to historic Anacostia at rush hour and how dangerous it can feel cycling on MLK. That was in response to the other one that Brett, that you just responded to about walking underneath. Is the assumption that the bicycles will be sharing a road with a car or sharing a sidewalk with a pedestrian? Our sidewalks are very narrow as they are. And then,
And that's a
ahead.
good, I was going to say, that's a good question that each location, we have to analyze it separately because where it is too narrow, you can't put both together.
okay, and then somebody was saying that's why cycling should be on a secondary road, which would be safer.
Mhm.
And yes, a separated protected lane for bikes is what cyclists want too. I agree with Brent about riding home rush hour, also about the pollution. Regarding the stress level map, supposedly Good Hope Road, Marionberry is a designated bike route. That's crazy. I usually bike on the sidewalk on Marionberry, way too dangerous to bike on. Agree with Guillermo, secondary roads or dedicated pathways are the safest. The Shepherd Branch pathway / multi-use trail, which repurposes the abandoned rail line running
Multi-use.
between Ward 7 and 8 needs to be a priority.
Mhm.
Multi-use. How does it feel riding bike? Suicidal. Yes, agree with the dire need for the Shepherd Branch Trail. Somebody
Eric,
said I will not use.
I just got to
Right.
pause for a minute. David asked the
Mhm.
question about wanting folks to provide how they feel. David, they answered your question directly.
Yeah, they did, which is good. That's good.
Yes,
That's what we were
exactly what
looking
we
for.
wanted to hear. Right.
I will not use a dedicated bike lane as it is inherently dangerous for the cyclist. I use secondary roads when I ride. It is a safer and faster ride. Specific concerns about riding are speeding, disrespectful drivers, and lack of enforcement. Let's see, barriers. Sidewalks on Marionberry that are too narrow to bike on and are dangerous for pedestrians and people waiting for the bus. Somebody mentioned they only heard about this because of a mailing. We must do better to engage the community. So the mailing was a great way for us to reach out to the community and make sure that they got the information. I do want to say that we did email this to all of the ANC commissioners and the community organizations, and I will ask you as a community, when you receive those things, if you could pass it on to your folks and friends and neighbors and constituents, that would be great as well. We really appreciate all the help that everybody's already given us in pushing out this information, but I am actually glad to hear you got the mailing because that's one of the ways that we wanted to make sure we reached out to people. Marionberry between 13th and MLK is extremely difficult to bike on the sidewalk because it's so narrow, but way too dangerous to bike on, let alone trying to cross MLK, which is also horrible. It's like 2 different gauntlets to survive before getting to the park via bike. And I did want to just go back to one other thing too, is DDOT also posts about all of their meetings on their social media, as well as sending out emails and releases and working with local media. I know that this meeting was on News Channel 9 and other places as well. So again, takes a concerted effort on everybody's part, and we thank everybody for all their help in pushing out information as we send it out, because this is, as we've been saying all along, we value people's opinion and we really want to hear back from folks. Okay, did we want to stress we should look at placing decorative bollards along the sidewalk to protect pedestrians, especially at MLK and Good Hope? And somebody thought that was a great idea.
Mhm.
I'm always afraid a car will drive right through the Capital One Cafe window when they fly over the bridge. I heard about this because I received several of my neighbors' mailers just last week. That's great. I do want to stress that buildings are close to the curb, sidewalks are not very deep. Cars often hit the building where the Anacostia sign, they drive fast coming off the freeway. Bollards from MLK to Howard Road and Good Hope to Minnesota. In what way are you reviewing the impact of the toxic fumes? And I think you've addressed that, Brett, already.
It's one of the factors. Yeah.
And again, impact of inhaling the fumes is a negative impact on recreation. How can community members be part of the advisory committee? How do they sign up?
Well, there's no advisory committee for this project right now. We probably would look at that when we get to the phase 2 work. Right now, we just
The
have a
best thing,
stakeholder committee, which is the agencies involved, and then you all as the public engagement.
right? So right now, the best way is to post information and or feedback and comments on the engage.dc.web website. Also on the screen, you'll see the project manager's email is here. You can email him and somebody from the team will get back to you. Or if you just want to make a comment that's noted, send the email there as well. And we'll make sure that your comments are received and noted as part of the analysis and study as well. Is a sound barrier possible on 295? I know this is the Ward 8 meeting and not the Ward 7 meeting, but it would be nice if there was a lower stress bike connection at the Nanny Helen Burroughs underpass so that you can connect from the Riverwalk Trail to the Marvin Gaye Trail. And to be very clear, we are taking all comments, whether Ward 7 or Ward 8. We just did 2 meetings, so because as you can see, there's quite a lot of information and we wanted an opportunity to present it all. But the feedback and everything that we're getting goes up for all of for the entire project, which includes both wards. You can also go to the DDOT website to receive project meetings, including this project. If you want to find out about all of DDOT's project meetings, you can go to DDOT's dot.dc.gov website and sign up there. There's a link there that you can sign up and you will get an email on all the project meetings, including on this project. More bus lanes and encouraging bus use will go a long way to moving more people through our communities. Okay, so that's what I have in our chat. And then I do have a couple of questions Q&A, and I see someone has raised their hand in the attendee list. So Brett, I'm going to move over to these 4 questions I see in the Q&A first, and then Mr. Comer, we will come to you and hear your comments as well. So first, how do you incorporate the Rails to Trails effort that the Ward 7 and 8 community are working on with CSX?
David, do you have a comment regarding that on your review of the trails? Or Greg?
Sorry, can you repeat it? Because I only caught half of it.
Karen, can you repeat it?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate the Rails to Trails effort that the Ward 7 and 8 community are working on with CSX?
Any and all current activities are great to incorporate to look at and incorporate into the project if possible. You know, there's a bunch of initiatives that the district is working on, like the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens to Arboretum Bridge, you know, across the Anacostia. There's lots of initiatives. Some of them are government-led, some are neighborhood citizen-led. So yeah, any and all of them all play into our recommendations. So, you know, if there's a separate Rails to Trails initiative going on, working with CSX, that's wonderful. Anytime anybody could make some progress working with the railroad is a wonderful thing. So yeah, we'd be happy if anybody has additional information about that. We'd love to hear about it to learn more.
And I would note too, David, to that point, the trail projects that are projected for Dean Avenue and New York Avenue, those will be shared at our next public meeting as well. And then the trail team will also be at that meeting, at the public meeting. So they are the unit that's involved directly. And then you can certainly ask them in the in-person meeting,
Yeah.
which will give more of an opportunity
Yeah, we'll
to
be drilling
discuss
down into these
people
in
directly.
greater detail at the time. Great.
Right, exactly. Just another notice about the I-295 ramp is a death trap. There's a tremendous need for some type of traffic calming. I've also noticed that folks drive through red lights and have no regard for the safety of others. I will say we heard from a number of people about the 295 ramp as well last night. So thank you for that comment. There is a problem with the pedestrian bridge over by Anacostia. When it rains, the foot of the bridge is generally flooded and muddy. Who will maintain the pedestrian bridges to ensure that Ward 8 residents do indeed have access? We want to ensure a greater sense of racial equity in this process. And then the last question is, what is the scope of the solutions that are on the table as part of this study? And I think Brett that goes to where we are in the study. I'll let you answer
Right.
that
And
question.
yeah, and we had a similar question last night, and I will assure you that what we're going to do in the second phase, because right now we're just assessing the existing conditions. In other words, we're not proposing solutions in this phase. That'll be in the second phase. And what we'll do in the second phase, and even towards the end of this one, we may come back with the categories and provide examples from projects that have been done in other parts of the country to solve these kind of problems in different ways. So we'll be coming with what we call visions so that you all can understand the context of what's possible. So it's not in this phase, but we will be providing that so that you can understand it through the use of real world examples. Thank you, Karen.
We did have another question in the chat, which is about the posting on DDOT's YouTube channel. Somebody just looked through the videos of DDOT virtual meetings on the YouTube channel. There are only a few and all the virtual meetings held in the last 6 months. What is the reason older virtual meetings are not posted? Are they deleted after 6 months, or did DDOT start posting its virtual meetings only 6 months ago? I don't have a direct answer for that at the moment. But we will find that out and get that information from the DDOT's communication office, and we will post that. Let's see. Oh, I just got a response to somebody. I guess they are deleted after 90 days, the virtual meetings. Somebody also noted, please continue to plan for the streetcar extension to Benning Road. This connection is critical for Ward 7 to access the 8th Street Shopping Center, shopping corridor, and Union Station. I did post in the chat also for those who are asking about trail projects, the website, DDOT's website, which is trails.ddot.dc.gov. That information is now located in the chat. If you want to, for the person who was asking about the bridge at Anacostia and the flooding, also, if you want to go ahead and email Mr. Habtemarian, again, there's his email is on the screen. And they can have maintenance, DDOT can have their maintenance unit go out and assess and then make the necessary repairs.
Hey, Karen, I want to answer one other question that was
Sure.
regarding the streetcar extension to Benning Road. Chris and I talked about that yesterday, and no matter the status of the streetcar itself going forward and whether it's extended or not, there is money in planning that will be moving towards reconstructing the components of the Benning Road Bridge so that there will be improved sidewalk and pedestrian and bike trails for that. So the connection and the access will be improved even if the streetcar itself doesn't get implemented. So that'll be a help for them for the access as well.
Thank you, Brett. And then we do have someone who has their hand up. Mr. Comer's been patiently waiting. If we want to, I'm going to request to unmute. And there we go. Hello, Mr. Comer. Would you like to ask a question or make your comment? Yes, sir.
Wonderful. My name is Chris Comer. I'm a homeowner here in Ward 8. I live near Bowen Road, Southeast. I'd like to make one comment. I think there's only one solution to reverse the destruction that 295 did to the communities east of the river. That's putting it underground. To quote Greg, there's no other way to fully heal the sins of the past. And I'm begging this committee here to fiercely lobby for putting 295 underground in phase 2 and reuniting our Anacostia community with our river. Is there any realistic possibility of this happening? I'll admit I'm pessimistic, but I would love for someone here to change my mind.
Well, I'll just answer by initially saying that your voice is joined with the same number of comments we heard in the same manner last night as well from Ward 7. So there is a community commonality here that we're hearing for the same thing. I just can't unfortunately answer that because of the phase of the work we're in right now for the district. But certainly that would be identified in phase 2.
Can you answer if the district is open to or looking at resolutions of that magnitude?
It's in our scope of work to consider that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really do believe that new footbridges with chain link fences or pedestrian tunnels underground will just only be band-aids to the bone deep gash that is 295 running through our communities.
Appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Any other hands up, Karen, or other questions?
You know, Brett, this is Greg Alt, and one other comment that came up several times last night, folks, that it's, you know, seminal to the question this gentleman just asked is 295 has local traffic. You all use it, people that live in DC, people live in the vicinity, but it also has a lot of commuter traffic. And there's a kind of a, how do you resolve those two different things? And there were several questions last night, and sir, it kind of goes, you know, along with your question. If you're going to think big, you know, how big is big? So your question is a big one, and also, then, is there a way to sort? How can we, you know, how can we work in a positive way with the commuters that drive through town, have nothing to do with you, have nothing to do with your community, other than they're going from here to there, and the local traffic that you're a part of? And I mean, that's part of the question. And I wanted to raise that because we got several questions of that last night. Thank you.
And one thing that I'll just add, Brett, that you also mentioned last night is there are some examples around the country of other communities that are looking at a variety of different ways to approach these bifurcated highways as well.
Yeah,
And,
there are examples
at
that are
the-
in, right, that are in planning, and there's also some that have been built. So those visions that I talked about that we're going to bring forward will show both of those examples.
Right, at the next public meeting. Again, this is about gathering information. So again, all this feedback is excellent, and we thank you all so very much. A couple more people have posted to the chat, so I'm just going to go through a couple more things. We have a couple more minutes here. Somebody else said they support burying the highway underground too. And then there was some concern that doing that would damage the watershed. And then there's some note there that, you know, that can all get figured out. Have commuters use other roads. They're the ones disrespecting and speeding through the communities they don't live in. Just for your information, there's an act of Congress which prohibits overhead wires in the District of Columbia and has not been repealed by Congress. Why is there always traffic at Pennsylvania 295 south and north of the BW Parkway? What are you doing to stop the bottleneck?
To just answer that plainly, I hear the comment and I agree because I experienced that same bottleneck in those locations, both Pennsylvania and Capitol Street as well. Those are always, it doesn't even seem to matter what time of the day or night that you always have a slowdown and sometimes a complete stoppage there. That is part of the solutions that we'll be considering in phase 2, because that solving the traffic problem will also help address the safety issues that would allow us to reconnect.
And then Brett, too, I think you mentioned this as well. Somebody had asked this question last night. I didn't see it asked this evening, but may want to mention that because the interstate is 2 segments, local and federal, that everything is being considered.
And that's what Greg was talking about, that there's almost 2 issues here, 2 groups of users, and solving one without solving the other is not going to come to a result that will really accomplish the reconnection that we want to have.
Right. And certainly cost is always something that needs to be looked at as well. Okay, no, and then Chris also noticed Mr. Comer, who was on the phone, no responsible parent is going to allow their young children to cross a 6-lane highway by themselves. I want the team here to use that example as a paradigm. If you were living in Berry Farm, what would it take for you to be comfortable to have your children walk to the park by themselves? It's not a pedestrian bridge or tunnel, it's moving the highway underground. Don't protect pedestrians from the highway, fully remove the threat of the highway from pedestrians. We don't want our children to breathe in the exhaust of 295. And then two people just said, excellent point. And yes, you are correct, sir. And just double checking my questions, making sure that we acknowledged everybody who came, the great feedback that we got. That's fantastic. Okay, so again, in the chat, we have put Mr. Habtemarian's email. We have posted about there's a DDOT Trails projects, which is at trails.ddot.dc.gov. There is the YouTube channel and our engagedc.gov as well. I'm gonna take that. And so I just want to make sure that everybody has access to all of the things that they need to have access and can provide the feedback in a way, in a manner that works for you as well as works for us. So I want to thank everybody. We are just getting completely met what we needed to do and gotten to 8 o'clock. So just about 8 o'clock. So I want to thank everybody again for taking the time with us this evening, for providing your feedback, for engaging with us. I, again, would ask you to please forward the information to anybody you know who would be interested. Send them an email, tell your friends and family about it. We would really appreciate that. And we will be back in touch as we get closer to getting the date for the second meeting. And we will be engaging the community throughout, as well as we attend other events and reach out to community members. So thank you again for everybody coming. I see a new, make sure I'm not great. And all the information is all there. And I don't know, Brett, if you had anything else, but I think we're done.
Really appreciate the comments. Very thoughtful.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, all.